There's two ways you can deplete your brain of omega-3 fatty acids. One is don't eat any, and the other is drink a whole lot of alcohol. But alcoholics who elevated their levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their blood, they were nearly 10 times more likely to stay sober in the first 90 days after they sought treatment. And we know in animal and human studies that brain levels of DHA can get depleted by half when drinking chronically high levels of alcohol. When alcohol depletes the omega-3s from the membrane, it not only changes the number of dopamine neurons, it changes the gene expressions in the center of the cell that creates and signals to make more dopamine neurons and to grow them. And so the cell really can't grow the new dopamine neurons unless it has an omega-3 fatty acid DHA around and its components to signal the genome to do it. So two things happen. Number one, you don't have as many dopamine neurons and you don't have as much joy. And when you don't have as many dopamine neurons and joy, you go out and seek some joy, and if that joy comes in the form of a bottle, you drink more booze. And for a little while, you elevate your dopamine levels and you feel good, but in the long run, you've destroyed the fatty acids in the membrane and you've destroyed the dopaminergic neurons. A further accelerating property can be when you get drunk a lot, you don't cook your own food, and you're more likely to get garbage junk food, and those foods have a lot more omega-6 fatty acids. So what gets replaced in the brain is omega-6 fatty acids, which accelerate depression, accelerate inflammation, and accelerate further problems. You feel miserable, and what do you do when you feel miserable and you're an alcoholic? You go get more stuff to drink, and you accelerate the cycle and further go downhill. So by restoring the omega-3 fatty acids, the dopamine neurons can grow back and joy can grow back, and people can hopefully reverse their addictions. And to directly test the efficacy, we specifically looked at a randomized trial where we gave chronic alcoholics either about 2 grams of omega-3 fatty acids or a placebo to see what would happen to their levels of drinking and to see what would happen to levels of dopamine measures. So we took people who were drinking, half a gallon a day of hard liquor, every day for 10 years, who'd failed all other alcohol rehabilitation treatments. We tested their blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids to assess whether they actually took them or not. So amongst the alcoholics who elevated their levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their blood, they were nearly 10 times more likely to stay sober in the first 90 days after they sought treatment. And amongst those who elevated their levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their blood, we found elevations in dopamine function when we assessed their cerebral spinal fluid. A 10-fold reduction in risk of relapse is a much larger effect than any FDA-approved treatment for alcoholism or addiction that exists. The treatments, acamprosate, naltrexone, like a 20% increased risk in sobriety. It's almost nothing. It's almost non-detectable, yet it's FDA approved. This study that we did in the NIH is consistent with some studies that have been done in Brazil, and in those studies they found a reduction in relapse to alcoholism. So whether you are directly drinking and addicted or not, the abundance of alcohol problems in our society ultimately affects all of us. For example, we'd prefer not to be killed by a drunk driver. We'd prefer not to have our healthcare dollars spent on all of the consequences of addiction. Poor health, violence, aggression. My argument is that we can save a huge amount of healthcare costs and spending in dollars by simply correcting a profound nutritional deficiency of omega-3s.